Mixing with Mike boot camp tip, creating separation with compression. The art of mixing is a combination of gluing instruments together that you want to sort of merge or make sound together, and also creating separation between different elements in a mix. And I've found that compression is the easiest, most effective way to create a simple separation between any two elements. Take, for example, here, what we have is a classic scenario where we have a bass and a kick drum. And often what will happen is people will go through all kinds of hoops with equalization and all these intelligent plugins showing areas where the frequencies sort of cross over or conflict with each other, and spend less time on just a simple compression technique that would actually create all the compression. The idea is that when you have a sound and you work with compression, you're primarily doing one of two things. You're either making it breathe in some kind of way, musical way, or you're stabilizing it in other words, just basically keeping it within a singular location and moving less. So this would constrain the sort of natural dynamic movement that a sound has or a performance has. So what I'm going to show you here is we'll start with just nothing raw. What I have here on the channel is just like a basic EQ, no compression. So this is just a kick and the bass. Right? More or less sounds kind of flat, not a lot of movement. Now I'm going to do something here with it. In other words, it's not, they're not like stumbling all over each other, but they're not really separated, or you don't really feel, the full separation or one kind of pushing through the other. And when you put that in the context of a whole mix, that's not going to be good enough to sort of cut through. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up two just real simple here, just to kind of show you this technique in the most simple way. When you have a Fairchild, it basically, if you're not familiar with it, you basically have a fast single release setting, right? That goes, like 100 milliseconds or so. And then you have two slower release settings. And then you have the broadcast release settings, this being the slowest, where it has the longest decay curve. So what happens is the recovery is very slow on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and forth between these two modes with the slowest one here and the fastest one here. So for example, one way to make the bass and the kick drum kind of work together is to take the kick drum and make it breathe. Right? And then here I have a bass, and with the bass I'm going to do the opposite, where I'm going to make it kind of hold on to the sound. Right? So just with that simple thing, you could hear how one is flat with this bypass, and the other has the kick drum with the movement sort of pushing through the bass. Right? Right? So now they work better together. I could also do the opposite here. So let's just say that I take this and I apply the opposite. So I want the bass to kind of breathe more, right? So let me bypass that one. And I could take the kick drum and do the opposite here, where I have this sort of sustain more, or the gain reduction sustain more. So now the difference here, what I have, if you listen to one, the bass is kind of moving or weaving within the kick drum, which is more stable. And this is a very common technique because the kick drum is just playing something that is the same every time. You hear this exact sound like over and over again on so many records, just like holding it there, right? Staying in this stable place. And the bass, because it's doing something that's melodic and thematic in the song, actually having the movement there helps it to kind of become a more vital part of the whole production. Versus this, which is the other way around of the kick drum pushing through. So the idea is very simple. It's just about whether you're creating movement or not. Now, when working with other sounds, this actually comes in very handy for doing things like, for example, here in the same section, I have this main pluck part, which kind of goes through the whole song. So it's just a synth sound that plays this mostly kind of rhythmic thing, right? And then I have a marimba part, which plays the same thing. Spread out wide. Okay, so now if I want to, I could use this technique to merge the two sounds together. So let's just because I've been working with it here. And this is, what am I missing? BUI. Okay. Oh, that's ascend. Haha. Okay, there we go. Just get my crap together here. Try to keep it PG for the family. Here, and then I'll just copy this over here. So we'll make it. So now here, if I take this, let's just say I want to really merge the two sounds together, and I want them to be axle. So let's just start with one simple thing here where I make them breathe a little bit. Right, so now that this is just going to add a little bit of movement to it with the quick release. So now I'm getting gain reduction. I'm not adding any makeup gain, and it sounds louder. It sounds louder because there's movement, right? And that movement creates, you're also getting that quick recovery, right? And that, creates this feeling of it being louder, but it's not actually louder. In some senses, technically, it's lower in level. Here, I could do the same thing here on this marimba part. So I'm just giving a little more gain reduction here to create some movement. Now if I put the two of them together, right, now they're moving synchronously. If I wanted to separate the two of them, okay, I could actually go the opposite here. So let me just kind of copy this over. Oops, and I'll move it like this. So now I'm going to stabilize the marimba part. Right, now that main pluck part kind of stands out a little bit, and if I go back here and do the opposite here, then what I can do is put this over here. And now what happens is the marimba part kind of stands out from the other. So here's the whole thing. I could glue them together, making them both the same sounds. Or make them separated. So it may be just like a subtle thing that you're hearing, but when you start to do this with instruments, when you're putting things together, you're deciding what elements you sort of want to combine and have like sort of merge into one sound. So creating this common processing technique actually helps to stage those elements together, that they merge together. And sometimes you want to create a separation for instruments that occupy a similar frequency area. This is incredibly effective for those things where you have electric guitars and acoustic guitars that are occupying the same space. Whichever one you want to kind of drive a little bit more in front, like if you have a distorted guitar and an acoustic guitar, put the fast release on the acoustic guitar, it will kind of move out in front of the heavy electrics, which will sound, which will have less transient energy anyway, so they'll just stabilize, let the compression just sort of glue the sound together, get the movement from the acoustic, and the two can sit in the same place without conflicting with each other. It doesn't mean that the frequencies don't have an effect, but the compression allows you to get more natural sounds wherever you want to, and not be forced to over EQ things and put things in a place where they don't really sound right or sound natural when blended together, and because you're not using other means of creating the separation between those two elements, you're getting more conflict from the EQ. This technique here allows you more creative, a wider range of creative possibilities with the way that you want individual instruments to sound. This whole thing can also work just on a simple level with having, and this is often done where you have the whole rhythm section or whole drums and bass, for example, that are running through a Fairchild, or that's like a Fairchild. This is just like one thing. I'm just showing you with this just because it's just a simple, easy example. But I could take all of the drums. You're trying, you love. Right. So now all the elements there in the drum kit kind of are hitting this wall, and that includes the bass, that stem, and now we have the vocal over here, and the vocal has an 1176, which is pumping and breathing. You're trying, you lost me, thinking that you could leave me, losing all the lies that you tell. But if I turn it off, the one who you chase and cheat ain't bad like me, don't believe the lies that you tell. Right, so the basic idea here is that with the compression on the vocal kind of breathing a lot more, it creates the movement. The other compression with the fast attack and the slow release stabilizes the sound, and you get this thing that's so common. It's like in almost every mix I hear today, there's some variation of this where you hear the drums sort of hit this wall like just behind where the vocal is. And people wonder, well, how does that vocal sound like sit right in front of there? And this is exactly the way that that works. All right, so there's just a quick tip for you on creating separation with compression or gluing sounds together with compression. It works both ways. Just that technique, even with the fast release, or a medium release with a musical timing on all of the drums and percussion with the identical settings, will make them all breathe at the exact same rate and make them sound like they all belong together. It's these subtle cues that help to glue together elements in a mix, so that when you listen to it, just like all the commercial mixes that you listen to, they always seem to sound simple, like there's not a lot of stuff going on. That's because these type of techniques allow the mix engineer, if you understand them, to glue together certain elements that you want to be glued together so that you still hear them independently, but they kind of sit in a place, and it's a little bit easier on the listener. Right? You're not getting as much wild information from all over the place. Everything is sort of simple and kind of in its tidy little place in the mix, and you get it all to gel together. All right, there's your boot camp tip, creating separation with compression. This is just the tip of the iceberg, this tip. In the Mixing with Mike bootcamp, there is just loads of this type of information and all the subtlety. There's examples of this happening with different styles of music. You'll see examples of this with 4 or 5 different styles of music, different songs, and how you can apply these techniques with different approaches to create that separation and that movement and really bring a mix, get it to come to life, creating that depth and separation. There's loads of this. It's a 52-week program. There's a good 3 to 5 hours worth of content every week, so it's like a total of over 200 hours of content, loads of multi-tracks to work with, and loads of insight on listening, lots of listening exercises, mixing techniques, and ways of creating separation and really learning the art of mixing, not just a bunch of trying to cobble together a bunch of quick tips, but really understanding how it all works together. Uh, Check it out at mixingwithmike.com. It's a mixing bootcamp tip, creating separation with compression.